ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my ranking of all the Third Doctor's stories. That's Jon Pertwee. So if you've missed my first and second Doctor's list, being William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton, there will be a link to the playlist in the description below. Now, unlike the first and second Doctor's runs, there are no missing stories. Well, at least if you take the black and white ones. There are a few stories that have only survived in black and white, but compared to William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton, I'll take it. So let's jump into it. Number 24. Death to the Daleks. The Tardis completely shuts down after it lands on a strange, dark and misty planet that appears to be completely barren. The Doctor then gets captured by some hooded people and rescued by some humans. Sarah Jane goes looking for the Doctor, but instead finds the Forbidden City. Then who just so happens to land on the planet but the Daleks. Yep, that's right. A Dalek story is in last place, and for me that's a big deal. I think possibly it's because I love the Daleks so much that where this story was so disappointing, it disappointed me even more. To start with, let's just say that Sarah Jane to me seems to be behaving very much out of character. I really started enjoying Sarah Jane I enjoy Sarah Jane, but one of the things I really enjoyed about her is how she isn't so much a screaming companion. Yes, she calls for help from the Doctor, but she's not like, ah! But she did seem a bit more screaming for screaming's sake in this story, and where it's one of the things I love about Sarah Jane, it's a bit off-putting. Next thing I didn't like about this story was how the Daleks are very much nerfed. Whoever knew, I suppose a small spoiler, but whoever knew that the Daleks' kryptonite was sticks. One of the Daleks get blown up by being hit with sticks. No thank you. But still, when a Dalek blows up by being hit with sticks, it's a bit... Plus, one of the things I love about the Daleks, especially in the second Doctor's run, is how manipulative the Daleks were. But these Daleks are right back to basic Daleks, where they're just like, we are powerful, and that's it. And even though they're weaponless, they still go around saying, yep, you're going to follow our instructions. And they don't even try to manipulate the situation. It's just like, yeah, you're doing what we say, or we're going to kill you when we can't. And then everyone goes on with it. Okay. And finally, let's move on to the bits where some of the scenes don't seem to be in the right order or thought out correctly. The biggest example of this is the cliffhanger to one of the parts where they walk into the room and the Doctor's with a guy, one of the alien guys, and then the Doctor's like, stop! And then they look and there's a red floor. And then cliffhanger. And that's it. It's like, oh, scary red floor. But then, of course, we come back to it. And it's like, stop, red floor. And then the Doctor pulls out his sonic screwdriver and does the sonics. And then makes their way. They jump from square to square, leading away with you looking at the sonic screwdriver. Not using your intelligence. And then they get to the other side. And then after they get to the other side, the Doctor goes, okay, pulls something out of his pocket, throws it down onto the floor, and it gets electrocuted. I think you got it the wrong way around there. First off, you show us the danger, then the cliffhanger, then you make your way across, and using the sonic's a bit cheap. It's just disappointing Daleks, disappointing story. And I've seen a few people try to defend this story online, but to me, it's the worst one of the Third Doctor's run. Number 23. Invasion of the Dinosaurs. The TARDIS lands in London, but everything has been abandoned. This is because dinosaurs are attacking London. Now, whenever you hear about this story, the first thing you hear about is the really, really, really bad effects. And they are pretty bad, but to be honest, that's not the worst thing, because I always go into these classic episodes expecting bad effects. It's only when the effects or the designs of the things are even lower than I think that they would be capable of. And yes, I think they could have done a bit better with a higher budget, but I'm not completely convinced. The bigger problem I have with this story is it's illogical, and it's very hard to explain the bits that don't make any sense whatsoever without spoiling anything. I don't mind very, very small spoilers, but this one's quite a large spoiler. And overall, and some characters again behave out of character and they're illogical. It's one of those ones where you sit there and in the end trying to work it out, and I guess that's why more people worry about the effects, because if you start trying to think of the story, that's bad too, because there's a lot of calls to digitally improve this story, but I don't think it's going to help. The dinosaurs might look better, but then the story doesn't work. It's kind of a mess from beginning to end. Number 22. Infernal. A team of scientists are drilling to get past the Earth's crust to find an alternative energy source, but one of them is turned into a monster and is killing people. Now, the Doctor steals some power from this power station and uses it for an experiment on the TARDIS. But the TARDIS then gets sent to a parallel universe where everything is almost the same, but slightly different. Yep, I can hear people booing me now saying, what the hell are you talking about? Because this is one of those stories that is quite well loved, and I've got it down as the third worst story. But I don't get it. The core gimmick, as lack of a better word, of this episode is the Doctor being sent to a parallel universe. But that doesn't happen until the cliffhanger of part 2. So you're on regular Earth, following these scientists that are digging into the ground looking for an energy source. And then you get sent to a parallel universe where everything's exactly the same, only the one difference is that I assumed that the way it was played, it was Germany won World War II. And yes, that is quite a significant change. Yes, they could have done it some other way, but it's that kind of authority level. And yes, characters behave slightly different, especially the Brigadier is the biggest example. They've complete change, and he has a great performance, by the way. It's one of the saving graces, but it's a mess. But everything plays out exactly as it does, just a little bit faster. That's the aspect of this story, that in this parallel universe, in say bad universe, everything happens a tiny bit faster, so the Doctor can come back to the regular universe and fix it. But to me, what I would have done was, straight away from part 1, you get him in a parallel universe, and then you understand the differences in this universe, and then you fix that universe and then make your way back, but with a different angle, where it's like, instead of working with Unit, working against Unit. Because as it is, it's just like things go wrong in the second universe, in the bad universe, and it's like no stakes. It's just overly complicated and doesn't quite do what it's intended to. And if you love this story, great for you. I'm not taking anything away from you, but I just couldn't get into it. Number 21. The Time Monster. The Doctor has a strange dream about earthquakes and volcanoes and the Master above it all. So when he wakes, he builds a gadget that can detect active time machines. It just so happens the Master is building a machine that can transfer things from outside of time and back again. But why? Now this is a very hard to follow story. It does get a bit better towards the end, but it is hard to follow with time stopping and backwards and forwards, and the time monster isn't very convincing, and is a bit overly complicated. And on top of so, this is a Master story, and although I love the Master, and I'm sure if I was to watch this story by itself, it would be dramatically improved, but after like binge watching all of the stories one after the other, you do get a bit sick of the Master. You couldn't do this story without the Master, but where the story isn't up to par, it's just a bit, as you sit there, oh, does it have to be another Master story? Could we just have like one more in between or something? Number 20. The Sea Devils. The Doctor visits the Master in prison looking for the location of the Master's Tardis. The Doctor then hears about a ship that mysteriously disappeared, so he goes to investigate. Now the problem I have with this story is it's almost identical to the Silurians, but underwater. By itself, there's not much wrong with this story, but where we've already had the Silurian story, it's pretty much just a retread, and it's just watch the Silurians. You've already watched this story. It's just Silurians at sea. As for one of the small problems I have, it's not really a problem. It's just a bit that kind of twigs me and that doesn't make sense. And that's right at the beginning. So it's a small spoiler, but if they're in part 1, I'm more relaxed because it's more set up. So the Doctor goes to visit the Master in prison, and the prison guard's like, it's okay, we are completely immune to hypnotism. Okay, we can demonstrate this to you. Okay, so he puts on the camera into the Master, and the guard comes in with the Master's food, and the Master's like, you will obey me, just like the Master usually does, and he's like, no, and he just walks off, sort of thing. Yeah, there's a bit more to it than that, and he's like, oh, it's good. Then the Doctor then goes to see the Master, and he's like, oh, I'm turning over a new leaf. I'm good now. It's like, yeah, I just watched you trying to hypnotize a guy, but now the Doctor seems to be okay with it. It's like, oh, no, maybe the Master has turned over a new thing. He just tried to hypnotize a guy. You saw him! And it just kind of starts you off on the wrong step. Number 19. The Monster of Paladin. The Doctor returns to Paladin to meet the King, but gets some calculations wrong and arrives 50 years in the future where the King's daughter is now the Queen. The Federation the Doctor helped build in his last visit are using futuristic technology to help mine for minerals that are essential for their war effort. But the locals mining in these mines are being attacked by what appears to be their god. But why? Now this story is a sequel story to The Curse of Paladin, and I really recommend watching that one first, because otherwise you might struggle keeping up with what's going on in this one, because it does go a bit out there and you need to know a bit of what's going on in like the backgrounds of things, so it's a lot easier to understand. Now, one of the problems I have with this story is there's a bit too much running around in the mines. It is one of those typical Doctor Who stories where they run down the same corridor over and over again using different angles, so you're supposed to think it's different, but you can clearly see it's the same set. But it just seems to like pad out the story. And there's a secret passage which apparently everyone knows about, because it's almost like every 5 minutes are going through this secret passage, and it's just like, well, why do you even have that wall there when you knock it down and people can run through it? No problem, because it does get a bit ridiculous the amount of times they run through this passage. Overall, this is an alright story, but it's an extension that doesn't quite need to be extended. Number 18. Colony in Space. The Time Lords are worried about the Master, so they allow the Doctor to fix the Tardis as long as it works in their favour. The Doctor then lands on a planet with a human colony that can't grow food anymore. On top of that, they're being attacked by giant lizards. Or are they? This is one of those stories that's a bit of a shame, because it had a lot of potential, but it doesn't quite live up to it. There's definitely bits there, and it definitely falls into the biggest problem that you can have, and that's being forgettable. I had to read these notes a couple of times to remember things, and I think I remember bits and pieces, but if it's forgettable, then that's quite bad. This is one of those stories where you could cut the Master out the story and it would be improved. The addition of the Master is completely tacked on and it's completely unnecessary, and I think it would work a lot better without him. The only thing the Master adds to the story is the convoluted reason for allowing the Doctor to get off of Earth for a story, and I think that could be done a lot easier, because of course it's set up as though the Time Lords have said, okay, you can fix the TARDIS as long as it works for us, but you later find only in further on stories the TARDIS isn't really fixed. It's just a convoluted way of getting the Doctor where the Time Lords need him to be and the writers need him to be for reasons, so they can have this story, and I think that takes away from the story. I personally would have saved this story in my back pocket for when the TARDIS was fixed, and fixed the TARDIS a lot sooner. because yeah, it does add a lot of convolution that just muckies up the story, and I think with taking that out and taking out the Master's involvement would make a much more straightforward story about people trying to survive and giant companies colliding. And I think that in itself would be a lot more interesting. Number 17. The Mutants. The Time Lords give the Doctor a message to deliver. He then jumps into the Tardis and gets taken to a space station at the end of the Human Empire. The humans have been experimenting on a planet to try and change the atmosphere, but are causing mutations to appear on the native species. Now the Doctor needs to find out who to deliver this message for. Now, to start with, this very, very first part of this story was a bit complicated to follow, because I was taking in the information and thinking, oh, are we going to have like a Game of Thrones-esque political chess, if you understand what I'm meaning, where it's like killing the right person in the right way to get yourself some power, and like, as I say, Game of Thrones-esque way of playing the game. But after part one, you clearly see that it's not really that important to follow that. That's mostly there just to set up the players where they need to be. So you might follow the story a lot better with that knowledge, but where I didn't have that knowledge going in, it was a lot of work in part one trying to work out where everyone is. And although I think if they carried on down that path, even though it would have been a lot more complicated, it could have been interesting, but they turn away to go a different path, which is okay, but where it was, the setup was so confusing, it did knock down the things. Plus there's what I feel is a plot hole, because I was sitting there thinking, right, the Time Lords gave the Doctor a message to send to someone, and how they sent this message to the Doctor is they just teleported it to him, so it just appeared in front of him. Couldn't they just have done that to the person it was intended to? Just teleport it to them? And then the argument could be made, yeah, but the Doctor helps work out the meaning behind the message. Well, if you just made the instructions a bit clearer, that could have worked. Oh, but then the Time Lords would be interfering. They sent the message anyway, they're interfering, why not? And after you work that out, and you like try and work out, even though I was trying to fill the plot hole so it doesn't work, the only way it works is that way the Doctor's in the adventure and then we can follow them. And it just kind of meh. It gets a bit too complicated for its own good. Plus, it's a convoluted setup, and that really, if it's needed, it can work, but it wasn't really needed. Number 16. Planet of the Daleks. The Doctor falls into a coma after the Tardis lands, and Jo goes looking for help. As she makes her way through the alien jungle, she comes across 3 human-looking blonde men who say they can help. as long as Joe stays hidden. In this story, there's a lot of references to former Dalek stories, as I'm sure that anyone who can work out who these blonde humans I was talking about are could go, yep, that makes complete sense. But because of this, it does kind of feel a bit repetitive from, especially from Dalek. There's a few extra elements, like these invisible aliens, which I think Invisible Aliens is perfect for a low-budget sci-fi. That really saves the pennies. But them by themselves, they're fine. It is kind of a fine story, but it's fine. But another problem I have with this story is it's a continuation from the previous story, A Frontier in Space, but where it's kind of connected, then a lot of the plots in that kind of get dropped just to continue, to move on to the next story. Yes, it's mentioned a tiny bit, but it looks to me like they wanted these two stories to connect and they forced it in to make it work, but I think it was unnecessary. Number 15. The Mind of Evil. A prison is testing a new machine that can take the evil from prisoners, but whenever the prisoners are rioting, whomever is in the room with the machine happens to die in mysterious ways. Meanwhile, the Brigadier is running security for a peace conference, but the Chinese delegate is found dead. On top of that, unit is escorting an illegal missile for destruction. But what could connect these three things? Again, it feels like I'm repeating myself, but this had a very, very, very interesting concept, but is let down a bit. I think the story drags on a bit too long, and I think part of the problem is this peace conference. Quite a bit of time is dedicated to setting up this peace conference, and its use in the story, I think, you could change it to just a random city on the planet. Say maybe, I don't know, New York. That would be a good target. Change it just to New York, and it's a shortcut that I think would cut a lot of time out, and you would completely understand what's the point without a lot of setup. So that makes this peace conference and all the time that's set up in it a lot of quite unnecessary. No, you've changed your t-shirt. I need a shave. Number 14. The Three Doctors. A strange blob thing is hunting the Doctor, and after it devours Bessie, strange aliens appear and attack unit. The Doctor then tries to escape in the Tardis, but it doesn't work, so he calls for help from the Time Lords. But the Time Lords are busy with a massive energy drain, so they send for help from a familiar face. Now, this was the 10th anniversary of Doctor Who, and it was really nice to see all three of the original Doctors involved, even though William Hartnell, for obvious reasons, had a very minor role. Completely understandable because of his health condition, but it was nice to see him involved anyway. So, as for the start of this story, not much happens apart from some really horrible effects and some really just bad looking aliens. Nothing really happens at the beginning except for the doctors arguing with themselves, or himself, I guess you could say. Although it is put an end to by the first Doctor, and the second and third seem to respect the first, which is a bit strange if you think about it, considering that the first is the youngest. I don't know about you, but if I went back in time and met my younger self, I wouldn't respect him very much. I'd probably think he was a bit of an idiot, but still. But other than that, I can understand it, because on the same hand, you have to really respect William Hartnell for starting all of this and building everything. So it was a very tricky balancing act. Another thing I have to say is I think the Time Lords were a bit fast to break their one rule. It's like the one rule is, well, I say their one rule, it's like one of the biggest rules of time travel. You can't meet yourself, and it's like, we need help. No, you can't help you. Just send himself. You don't want to try anything else first? Maybe send the master, possibly. But yeah, the story definitely picks up when they get off of Earth. The big villain is a lot better than these henchman aliens. I don't want to spoil anything, but he's good. He's good. Also, another interesting thing that I found out while watching this episode, it's actually Patrick Troughton that was the first Doctor to ever say the words, "Would you like a jelly baby?" Not Tom Baker. That kind of was like, whoa, when I saw that bit. It's like, wow. Just learn something new every day. Number 13. Carnival of Monsters. The TARDIS lands on a boat, but the Doctor refuses to admit they're on Earth. Then an extinct dinosaur attacks the boat, and they appear to be in a time loop. Also, two entertainers arrive on an alien planet with a machine they say contains monsters. Now, this is a bit of an easy to watch story. It's not very in depth. It's quite easy to understand. So it's a good story if you just want to stick it on and just relax. Another thing I have to say about this episode is the aliens' makeup. Now, when I first looked at it, I was like, "Oh yeah, that makeup's just worn off." It's like, especially around the lips and the eyes. But that might not have been the intention, but it does kind of give them even more of a weird alien look. Maybe it was intentional, but it come across like the paint was wearing off. But I did kind of like it. It's like it threw me back at first, going, "Oh, come on, you can do a better job than that." But then it's like, actually, it's not half bad. Number 12. The Ambassadors of Death. Earth sent a rescue probe to see what happened to the missing Mars probe. After the astronaut goes aboard, a strange signal is transmitted and all communication is cut. The signal is being sent from an abandoned warehouse, but what does this have to do with the astronauts? This story, I find, is a very good analogue for racism and how that certain politicians can manufacture hate to keep power. And it's really sad to see how a story so old is still so relevant. And because of that, I've marked it quite up a bit, and I found it quite interesting. But in itself, it does a very good job at portraying that message. Number 11. The Claws of Animus. Mr. Chin works for the Ministry of Defense and takes over UNIT as an alien spaceship lands on Earth looking for fuel. They are willing to exchange it for a mineral that can grow anything. But if they have this mineral, how can they run out of fuel? Also, they have the Master on board the ship as a prisoner. Now, I think this is a really clever story with some pretty good pacing, and Mr. Chin is incredibly stupid and incredibly annoying, but that's the intent. And I think it works really well, especially that I'm pretty sure that people like this happen all the damn time. Again, one of those stories that it's sad about how relevant it still is. Some things just never appear to change. Also, I kind of like the Master's role in this one. I can't go into it because it's a bit of a spoiler, but I think the role the Master takes is pretty good. I like it. So definitely keep an eye on that. Number 10. The Silurians. A nuclear power plant is built within a cave and is losing power in strange things that are happening to the staff. So they call for help from UNIT. The Doctor then makes his way into the cave and discovers a living, breathing dinosaur. Now, I quite like this story and about how the Silurians are used. I like how it would be really easy, in my opinion, for humans and Silurians to live side by side, but yet both sides are desperate for war with one another. And it's just one of those human nature things. I'm not going to repeat myself yet again with the line that I'm getting sick of saying because it makes me sad every time I do. But yeah, one of the big things I like about this story is you don't see a Silurian properly until part 3. And yeah, it really does build the intrigue about what these guys look like and what the hell is actually going on. And I think it's done really, really well, and is definitely worth a watch. Number 9. Terror of the Autons. At the circus, we hear a familiar whooshing sound as a man in black jumps out of a caravan. He then steals something from a science museum that turns out to be the Nestine's consciousness. He then breaks into a satellite and transmits a signal from the Nestines. He then takes it to a plastic factory and builds some Autons. Oh yes, and he calls himself the Master. I think this is a really good introduction story for the Master. It has a really good pace and it doesn't seem to drag on at all. The only problem I have with this story is that the unit guns seem a bit inconsistent against the Autons. Sometimes they have zero effect whatsoever, other times bang after a couple of shots. But overall, I like the Autons, and it really does let you know everything you need to know about the Master. Number 8. The Green Death. A man is found dead after coming back from a mine covered in a green glow. Some corporate types want to mine for oil using a new method, but it is being protested against. But what exactly is down the mines? When I saw that people were getting hypnotized and I heard the speaker's voice, I was 99% sure I knew who the villain was, and it kind of made me go, ugh. But then I found out I was wrong. And then all of a sudden, it got quite interesting. It's not who I thought it was. And yeah, this is pretty good. Also, one thing I will say, giant maggots. So this is a story I do not recommend for Kelly, otherwise known as Lady K. Number 7. The Curse of Helen. The Tardis lands on Paladin, a planet being ruled by a young king, and is about to join the Galactic Federation when the High Priest is found dead. Is this the result of legend or something more? I found out after watching this that apparently this story was an analogue for Britain joining the EU, or whatever it was called at the time. It seems to have lost my mind. But it's essentially the EU before it was the EU. Now looking back at that makes it really interesting considering the political landscape Britain is in right now. Despite my feelings about it, it's really interesting to look at this story and the way things were going, and the way the BBC seemed to be pushing things in a certain way. So yeah. Also, this is a bit of a whodidits mystery. And I think it works really well. Number 6. Day of the Daleks. A diplomat that is trying to prevent World War III gets attacked by what he thinks is a ghost. As it turns out, he is a soldier from the future, using a crude time machine that is being tracked by the Daleks. Now, I like this story so much that I think the weakest part of this story is the Daleks themselves. They are a bit bland. And it could possibly be because in Patrick Troughton's run they were done so well, but in the Third Doctor's run it's just a bit... we're just nothing but muscle. But this story gets brought up a lot by the Controller, the human villain of the story. And yeah, he's done really well. The only problem I have with him is I can't quite watch it without getting the song Candyman stuck in my head. And now it'll be stuck in my head again. Number 5. Spearheads from Space. Strange meteors fall to Earth. Meanwhile, a man falls out of the Tardis and is taken to hospital. The Brigadier goes to the hospital looking for the Doctor, But this man isn't a doctor, is he? I'm not gonna lie. This story is high on the list because of nostalgia. Kaylee bought 2 videotapes. Yep, for those who don't know, videotapes were what they used to have before DVDs. For those of you who don't know, DVDs were what they had before Blu-rays. God, I feel old. So yeah, she bought 2 cassette tapes just after Doctor Who came back, and this was one of them. And I definitely watched this one quite a bit. Now, as for a story itself, this is obviously Jon Pertwee's first story as the Doctor, and I think it's done really well. I definitely like the regeneration sickness. In this one, he's a bit more sillier than his Doctor run seems to be. But yeah, I think it works because I think the way I see it is this is part of the regeneration sickness is this is 2 just leaving. He's still regenerating. So this is his silliness is 2 leaving. While 3 takes over, if that makes sense. He's still changing. So his mind is still not quite 3. He's still 2, but there's still a bit of 2 in there. And I like that. Of course, this can be also seen as Jon Pertwee hasn't found his Doctor yet, and he's still acting and playing the character to get used to the role. But in my headcanon, that's how it makes sense. It's the change. So yeah, I really, really, really like regeneration sickness. I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think this is one of the Doctors that do it the best. Now, this story it definitely has a good pace. It does slow down a little bit in the middle, but it definitely goes quite smoothly compared to some of the other stories. So yeah, it's good. It's really good. Yeah. Number 4. The Demons. An archaeologist is set to dig a devil's hump. And for some reason, the Doctor is determined to stop him. Also, the Master has become the head of a cult trying to summon demons. Now, I really, really, really like the mix of science and magic in this story. I think it's the right spot between the 2. Also, I like the role of the Master in the story, where he's manipulating a group of people to get his own way so he can rule. I definitely like what the Master's doing in this story. Another thing I like, but this I can see some people being turned off of, is the little grey demon. Little grey demon's a bit of a woo 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 woo. He does get played a little bit over the top, but I think it works. It kind of makes him look a bit alienish. Maybe it reminds me a bit of the putties from Power Rangers, and that's why I like it so much, but I can't help it. I like it. Number 3. Planet of the Spiders. The Doctor meets an extremely powerful, real clairvoyant. So he runs some experiments to try and find out the nature of his powers. Meanwhile, Sarah Jane is investigating a meditation monastery where they manage to succeed in summoning giant, talking, intelligent spiders. This story could have easily been number 1, quite easily, if it wasn't for the ridiculous, stupid long chase scene. And this is going to be a minor spoiler, but this chase scene is completely pointless because right at the end of it just teleports away. Why did he do that in the first place? Stupid spider. Also with the stupid chase scene, the Who-mobile, which isn't what it's actually called in the show, it's a fan name. But the Who-mobile, you find out, can fly. As if it couldn't be bad enough the first bloody time. We want Bessie! So this chase scene is absolutely ridiculous. And I know it was done as a thank you to Jon Pertwee, but yeah. No, it doesn't work. Doesn't work at all. But if you take that one scene out, it's a really good story. I definitely like these spiders. I can see why people want them back. Because some people want the spiders back. They want these spiders back. They've done giant spiders in different ways in the past, but they want these spiders back. And I do think you could do a lot with them. Some of the concepts I think were used in the New Year's special with the Dalek, but I still think it could work. And I would like to see some more. And wanting to see more is the sign that you've hit a good story and a good villain. But and another thing, kind of a spoiler, kind of not. See how you feel. But I would really, really, really appreciate the crystal that means that it makes you read good. Because you don't read good. If you have one of those crystals, if you could pop that in the mail to me, that'd be appreciated. Thank you. Number 2. Frontier in Space. The Tardis lands on a human cargo ship in the 26th century. The humans think the Doctor and Joe are Draconians when the Draconian ship is about to board them. Meanwhile, on Earth, it is revealed that Draconians think that humans are attacking their ships, but humans think the Draconians are attacking theirs. So who is telling the truth? Now, with complete transparency, a lot of people find this one quite boring. But not me. I really like it. I think a lot of people find it boring because the Doctor and Joe don't have much to do, and they spend a lot of the story in prison. But I find more the motivations behind things and the interesting. I like the psychology between the humans and the Draconians, and I find that fascinating. So I just want to know more. The only problem I will have with this story for myself is it gets dropped when the next story comes along and that they wanted to link the two together. So this one doesn't quite have a good ending, and that's probably why it's number 2 and not number 1, because if they ended it properly, I think that would work a lot better. But that being said, I don't think it's the kind of concept that you can end quite smoothly, because even if the Doctor comes along and says, this is the solution, and the heads agree with it and they're okay with it, people won't necessarily believe them. I mean, the actual traditional regular people would still a war. because that's just the way people work. But I think at the end, all you really would need would be, I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling doctor and your dumb blonde too. And I think that would have been enough. But other than that, really good story. A really good thinking story. Hey Ville, come. Ville wants to see who's number one. Number one. The Time Warrior. A Silurian warrior crash lands in the medieval ages and needs some materials to help fix his ship. He makes a deal with some criminals to obtain these in exchange for some modern weapons. In present day, scientists are going missing, and the Doctor is investigating as he realizes they have been taken back in time. So the Doctor jumps in the Tardis, but is he alone? Oh, you tired boy. Then he almost finished. Now, straight away you can see why Sarah Jane is one of the favourite assistants. She is incredibly intelligent, asks the right questions, and comes to sensible conclusions, but isn't stuck up on herself to realise she might be wrong. So I definitely like Sarah Jane in this story. He's really good. On top of that, you've got the first appearance of the Silurians, and again, they're pretty good. It's just one Silurian, just one, but you could tell how powerful they are and how successful they are, and it comes across everything in this one Silurian, and I really like how it's played. Plus, on top of that, the Doctor seems to be having a lot of fun in this story. He really seems to be enjoying himself, and it really works. And overall, it's a recipe for a perfect Doctor Who story, and you've got everything you would possibly need, and that's why it's my number one. So, I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please do that thing. I am the Foot. This is the tired footling. You're William. Into the tired footling. Spoke up. Thank you for watching.